have previously asserted that, in a democracy, it is logical that the law should impose equal rights and obligations upon all voters. I have also asserted that it is reasonable to confer different rights and impose different obligations on people who do not have the right to vote. What might that mean in practice? Well, laws exist to protect the persons and property of voters. Non-voters can damage property and persons in the same way voters can. So as a voter, who wants his property and person to be protected, why would I choose not to punish a non-voter who commits a crime against me? As a starting point, it makes sense to impose legal obligations on non-voters as well as on voters. What about legal rights? Well, on the face of it, if the law only exists to protect voters, why would it confer rights on non-voters? It seems that there is a logical case for punishing non-voters who commit crimes against voters, but not providing non-voters with any legal rights, which implies, for example, that the law would not punish anyone who commits a crime against someone who is not a voter. Now, it may make sense to apply this logic in its full rigor in some cases, for example, to people who do not have the vote because they are undergoing legal punishment. In other cases, it doesn't. For example, it may be beneficial economically for voters if foreign tourists visit the country. However, tourists are unlikely to visit a country where the law allows them to be robbed, mugged, raped, or murdered with impunity. So, if you want to encourage visitors from overseas, it makes sense to provide them with some legal protection, even if you do not provide them with the full legal rights of a voter, which would include things such as entitlement to state benefits and healthcare. Another group excluded from the electorate are those who are not considered to have the knowledge, understanding, and experience to vote in an informed and reasonable manner. One such group consists of children. So, in what ways might the legal rights and obligations of children differ from those of adults? Well, applying the logic above would mean children would be subject to the full rigor of the law, but receive no protection from it. I am not aware of any modern democracy that considers this to be appropriate or desirable. Why not? Well, one reason is that people are generally fond of children, or at least their own children, and therefore want children to be protected. In a democracy, that is enough in itself for laws to be passed that protect children. You may say that sentimentalism is not an adequate basis for legislation. But there are other reasons to provide children with protection under the law, in particular the fact that children grow up. Now, I value the society I live in. It has educated and supported me. To some extent it has shaped me, and as a voter I have tried to shape it, in a manner to suit me. I am comfortable living in it, and I therefore want that society to endure. Today's children will be tomorrow's voters. If that next generation of voters feels that society has let it down, it is unlikely to seek to preserve it, and may actively look to overthrow it. I do not want to spend my old age surrounded by revolution and anarchy, or living in a society that has been changed to the extent that it is alien to me. So, I want society to treat children well. You may point out that recent generations of children have been protected and mollycoddled to a greater extent than any generation before them, and yet seem to be more dissatisfied. So, when put to the practical test, my argument fails. But I disagree. I think we have let our children down, and have not treated them well. People talk about the innocence of childhood. What they really mean is the ignorance of childhood. Children do not have the knowledge and experience to understand how the world works. To become capable adults, they have to learn these things. But we shelter our children from the realities of the world. Life is essentially competitive, with winners and losers. But we do not teach our children this. In fact, we teach them the very opposite. Rather than celebrating excellence, we award prizes to everyone. We teach our children that if they want something enough, they have a right to it. That is not true. Achieving anything requires work, and even if you put the work in, you may not succeed. We give our children whatever they ask for, with the result that they do not value what they get. In practice, regulation prevents our children from having a paper round or other part-time job, so even if they wanted to, children have no opportunity to experience the satisfaction of buying something with money that they have earned themselves. We have produced a generation of children who have never grown up, and are completely unprepared for adult life in the real world. It is not surprising that they are dissatisfied. So when I say I want society to treat children well, I do not mean that we should spoil them. I think we should teach them the realities of life, and the best way to learn those is through experience. But also remember that children are not adults. Children do not have the knowledge, understanding, and experience to make decisions in the way an adult does. And this has several implications. Firstly, because I do not believe that children are fully capable of making rational informed decisions in the same way as an adult, I think it is reasonable to forbid children from doing things that may be harmful to them, or that they may later regret, for example, smoking, drinking, getting a spider's web tattooed on their face, and so on. Secondly, I think it is reasonable to apply different penalties to children and adults who commit the same crime. Now, the law is there to protect voters, and if the law is not applied to children, then voters will not be protected. So a child who commits a crime should be prosecuted, and be punished if found guilty. But the purpose of that punishment will lean more toward education and deterrence, rather than revenge. Although it is extremely unfashionable, corporal punishment provides a short sharp shock, that teaches a lesson and acts as a deterrent, but then allows the child to immediately return to a normal life. This is less stigmatizing for a child than a punishment in the community, and avoids the risk that incarceration will simply provide a young offender with an opportunity to learn some more unpleasant tricks from their fellow juvenile delinquents, although for repeat offenders these and other punishments may be needed. Thirdly, I think it is reasonable to impose stronger penalties on those who deceive or abuse children, compared to those who commit those crimes against an adult. One reason for this is that children do not have the experience to be alert to, and protect themselves from, deception, or in some cases even to know when they are being abused. Another is that children have no option but to rely on adults for protection, particularly those adults close to them. We have made an implicit commitment to look after our children, they trust us, and abusing that trust is pretty despicable. I am now going to move even further back in life, and turn from children to fetuses, and, in particular, to abortion. My emotional response is to oppose abortion. I have on the whole enjoyed my life. I am very glad that I was not aborted as a fetus, and I would not wish that fate on anyone else. It does seem to me that at the point an egg is fertilized, a human life has come into being, and, as a human, I am quite keen on preserving human life. I therefore think that methods of birth control that prevent fertilization from occurring are preferable to those that act after fertilization has occurred. Destroying a viable fetus, when there are many people desperate to adopt babies, seems a pity. I understand that carrying a child to term and giving birth to it is hard work for the mother, and creates an emotional bond that makes giving that baby up difficult. However, does the fact that someone's existence will be inconvenient to you for 9 months, and that you may come to love them, justify killing them? On the other hand, many people feel very strongly that abortion is a woman's right, either absolutely, or in certain specific circumstances. They are entitled to their opinion. And I think they should be entitled to their abortions. The fact of the matter is that laws against abortion are bad laws. They do not have overwhelming public support, they are almost impossible to enforce, and as a result they are widely flouted. So, despite my feelings, I believe that abortion should be legal. And this is a key point. There are lots of things I disapprove of, such as tattoos, Morris dancing, and bicycles. But I do not think they should all be made illegal. I have my views, you have yours, we are all different, and we all want to do different things. And, unless our actions violate the property or persons of other voters, I think we should be allowed to do what we want. I value choice, and if the price I have to pay to exercise my choice is that I allow you to exercise yours, well, I'm fine with that. It is far preferable to a situation where everyone's choices are restricted. So, what about animals? There are laws designed to protect animals. But is it reasonable that animals should have legal rights? And if so, what rights should animals have? Well, you might say that humans are just animals, and that animals should therefore have exactly the same rights as people. That is obvious nonsense. For example, would you give animals the right to vote? No, that would be stupid, because we cannot communicate with animals to the extent that they can understand, or meaningfully participate in, our democratic decisions. The next step down would be to put animals on the same footing as some category of non-voters, such as children, or foreigners. But non-voters have obligations, as well as rights. How do you explain to an animal that it is not allowed to break the law? And if it does, if a fox kills your chickens for example, are you really going to put it on trial, with a judge and a jury? No, you are not. You might say that you can't communicate with a very young child either, and that very young children have legal rights. But one day those children will be voters, and so be making decisions that affect me. I am therefore motivated to take care of them. That does not apply to animals. Maybe we should protect animals because they are sentient beings, and it is wrong to inflict pain on them. But this idea can be attacked from at least 2 directions. Firstly, as I have said previously, wherever I can communicate in detail, I find consciousness. And I see no reason to consider that consciousness is only limited to those objects with which I can communicate in detail. So yes, animals may well be sentient, but so may be trees, and rocks, and everything else. So, if I should avoid hurting animals because they may well be sentient, then I should avoid hurting anything. But that is impossible. To survive I need food, shelter, and what have you, and obtaining these things inevitably involves altering the state of things in ways that may be painful for them. After all, I have no reason to suppose that a tree enjoys being chopped down, or rock enjoys being quarried, or an apple enjoys being eaten. And secondly, what does it mean to say, hurting sentient beings is wrong? Now a statement may be wrong in the sense that it is factually incorrect, but we are talking about actions here. An action may be wrong in the sense that it is not consistent with a desired end, that there are reasons why I might not want to do it, but the statement hurting sentient things is wrong does not give such a reason. Instead, it claims to be a universal moral truth. Now, I am skeptical of the existence of universal moral truths. If there were eternal moral truths that were self-evident, then surely everyone would agree on what they are. But that is not the case. So, if they exist, they are only evident to some people, and even those people seem to differ in the truths that they see. So universal moral truths seem to be subjective, in which case they are not universal truths. But you may counter that I do believe in universal moral truths. I believe that it is wrong to lie. I believe that it is wrong to rape and murder people. But I do not in fact claim that these are universal moral truths, they are beliefs that I consider to be reasonable, based on the circumstances in which I find myself. So, I do not like people who lie to me, because, in an uncertain world, I want accurate information on which to base my decisions. I therefore hold liars in contempt. On my part, I try not to lie, because I want people to trust me, and if I lie, they won't. I think it is wrong to rape and murder, because I value choice, and I don't want to be forced to do unpleasant things against my will, or have my ability to make decisions in future abruptly curtailed. In order to be protected from this, I am happy to accept that I will be punished if I rape or murder people. In fact, I have no great desire to rape or murder anyone, so this is a cheap price for me to pay. These beliefs are not moral absolutes, they are ultimately based on pragmatism, and, while I try to live by them, I can imagine circumstances where, to protect my family or myself, it might be reasonable to break them. Now, in fact I do not like seeing animals suffer. And I do not react to damaged animals in the same way as I react to damaged trees or rocks. For example, I find it more upsetting to see an injured animal than I do to watch someone cutting a tree down. This is because animals react to pain in a similar way to me, which helps me imagine what the animal is experiencing. And I imagine those things happening to me, and it is unpleasant. So, my indifference to the suffering of trees and rocks is a result of a failure of imagination, and hence a lack of sympathy, on my part. And, if I see someone hurting an animal, I not only sympathize with the animal's pain, but I also see someone who is apparently enjoying inflicting that pain. And if someone enjoys inflicting pain, then they would presumably enjoy inflicting pain on me. That is someone I want to avoid. Further, if someone keeps a pet, or other livestock, that animal comes to rely on them. In a way, the animal's owner has made an implicit commitment to that animal, to look after it. Wantonly harming that animal is breaking that commitment, and I strongly disapprove of such behavior. But my sympathy for animals has limits. I enjoy eating animals, and I am therefore happy to butcher them. I would be happy to kill an animal for its fur. When my house was infested by mice, I was delighted that the poison I put down killed them. Humans have hunted animals, fished, and so on, throughout our history. Many people enjoy those activities, and I do not want to stop them from doing so. And I believe in property rights. If you own an animal, it is yours, and the logic of property says that you can do what you like to that animal, as long as you do not hurt other people in doing so. And for that purpose, an animal is not a person. So, if you torture your pet dog, I will hold you in contempt, point you out to others as a dangerous sadist, and avoid any dealings with you. But I'm not sure you should go to prison. What is the conclusion of all this? Basically, that in some cases when I see someone hurting an animal, I will sympathize more with the animal, and in other cases, I will sympathize more with the motivations of the person hurting the animal. My feelings are subjective, and others will feel differently. They may for example strongly feel that killing animals in order to eat them is wrong. It seems to me that laws designed to protect animals are based on arbitrary subjective sentiment, rather than being designed to protect voters, and I would therefore argue that they are not necessary. But it seems that the vast majority of people do support laws against certain forms of cruelty to animals. And, as I support democracy, well, if the vast majority want those laws, and cause them to be enacted, then, as long as they do not prevent me from doing things that I want to do, I will obey them. This does however raise interesting questions. Are there circumstances in which I would break the law? And where do I think the line should be drawn between the law and personal morality? Some people argue that it is okay to break the law, as long as, if you get caught, you admit your guilt and accept the implications. So, it is fine for me to drive at 80 miles per hour down the motorway, as long as, when the police stop me, I admit my guilt and pay the fine. Well, that is certainly better than denying my actions, and trying to lie my way out of trouble. But it still undermines the law. The law does not say that if I pay a fee to the government I can drive as fast as I like. If it did, that would be a very bad law. It does not treat all voters equally, but depending on their ability to pay. No, the law says that I will not speed. And, like it or not, I have a commitment to obey the law. By speeding, I am breaking that commitment, and I do not want to break my word. And consider, would you apply the same argument to murder? If a murderer is brought to trial, pleads guilty, and happily accepts his punishment, does that mean that it was fine for him to kill someone? I suggest not. I note that the same argument is used to justify professional fouls in sport. So a footballer knows that he will be sent off for cutting the legs out from under an opposing player, but calculates that it is worth doing so, to stop the opposing player from scoring a goal. Such a footballer is not worthy of respect. The rules of football, or any sport, set out a framework for how the game should be played. The whole point of the sport is that it is played within the limits set by that framework, otherwise the sport would degenerate into a meaningless free-for-all. If players transgress those limits, then a foul is called. But there is an underlying assumption that players will try not to commit fouls, that they will not try to win the match by acting in ways that are outside the limits set by the rules. To do so is cheating, plain and simple, and any victory so won is dishonorable and meaningless. What if I consider a law to be a bad law? Would I break it? Well, there are a lot of laws that I consider to be bad laws, and I generally follow them. After all, I prefer to live under a democratic system, and that requires that I accept democratically imposed laws. To do otherwise undermines the fundamental principles of the society that I want to live in. That would be self-contradictory. Having said that, democracy is only one of the things I value. Although I put a high value on democracy, I also put a high value on choice. At some point, if a law is restricting my choices in ways that I consider to be unreasonable, I may choose to break it, even though I am going against some of my other principles in doing so. But I would not do so lightly. And if laws are imposed on me, without due democratic process, then I will not regard them as valid, and I will fight for the democracy that I value so highly. As to where I think law should stop and personal morality begin, as I have said, I think that laws should only be passed where they are needed to protect the persons and property of voters. Everything else is a matter of personal morality, personal ethics, personal choice, and it is not necessary for the state to interfere.